Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to the Front Row Movie Reviews, a podcast for people who actually like movies and TV. And welcome to a new show that we'll be doing at least for a few weeks until we may get tired of talking about this new show. We'll see how it goes. But one of the things I warned Jeremy about when I joined the Front Row almost 2 years ago now is sooner or later I was going to have to talk about Star Trek. And at that point, we were a movie review podcast only. And I told him that's not going to work in about a year. And I actually said a year at that point because I thought this show was coming out in January of 2017. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But basically, I told him that sooner or later I was going to want to talk about Star Trek coming back onto TV. And it's taken a little bit longer than we thought. But starting next week, September 24th, Star Trek Discovery will be airing at least one time on network television before not, and we'll talk about that too. So we wanted to go ahead and do a pre-show to kind of talk about our first impressions, and there are a lot of them, about this new Star Trek show, but also talk about what we're looking forward to seeing, and then running into that to that new show. And hopefully the plan is to do a review of this show the night it comes out. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about how that may be a problem because CBS hasn't actually said when it's going to air, which is another great marketing technique, but we're going to try to get that out as soon as possible. And I say we, I'm Scott. I forgot to say who I was because I always do that. But I've commandeered at least one friend of mine and hopefully a few others as we get a little farther down this road. So with me today to talk about Star Trek Discovery is...
Hey, this is Mike.
Mike joins us after his wonderful tour de force talk of the Transformers and terrible Transformer movies that may have followed.
Just the good one and the fifth one so far.
We won't go back and talk about the other ones yet, but there will be a Bumblebee spinoff coming next year.
Starring John Cena.
Because putting a wrestler in there, it makes it top quality.
That is probably the number one thing about that movie that I'm the most excited about. So.
I'm still disappointed. We got Bumblebee versus the Nazis in Transformers 15 or whatever it was.
Did we?
We kind of did, but now we're going to get Bumblebee versus the 80s and John Cena.
We got Bumblebee versus Good Taste in the fifth one, but
true. But at least he could have been like a World War II type, like beat up on Nazis. Everyone agrees we can beat up on Nazis, but no, we decided to go ahead and go straight with the 80s, whatever that's going to be. But
yeah, I don't know.
That's for another day.
We're already off topic.
Welcome to the front row. So one of the things we need to talk about first is I feel like we need to put our Star Trek bona fides out on the table. And Mike was already joking about how he's not the most qualified person to talk about this show, but I think he has some qualifications that many would not have. And if he fails to mention them, I will for him. So, well, first off, Mike, tell me a little bit about your past experience with Star Trek. When did you first watch the show? What show was that? And just where you are in terms of being a fan or a former fan or whatever it may be of Star Trek.
Sure. So I started watching the series in earnest and during the TNG days. I feel like I tuned in relatively early to the TNG seasons based on everybody's horrible haircuts. And
the men wearing skirts?
Yeah. And just everybody generally looking malnourished. And I was like, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 10 or 12 or something. So it's not like I ever sat and binged any TV that I remember. But I think I probably sat through and ended up watching the majority of TNG. Definitely was in on DS9 more actively when it started up. Did eventually crawl through that, although I guess I lost track of it at some point and missed the later good seasons initially, and then got back to them later.
Yeah, Dominion War all the way.
Yep. Voyager. Started watching Voyager. Actually, I've actually never finished Voyager, so take that as you will. And I also never watched Enterprise. But I have, in the meantime, watched a bunch of TOS and the original Star Trek animated series, as well as played a few games. Did a little role playing.
Okay, see? Okay,
Okay, there you go.
there you go. I was going to embarrass you if you didn't do it yourself.
Okay, yeah, and that's. Oh, and made one, absolutely, I think hilarious Star Trek themed parody video for my work Christmas party one year.
I haven't seen this. I need
will
to
have
see
to
this.
share that with you sometime. I was the captain.
Oh God. And everything went down because of that.
We blew up a red shirt.
Nice. So with me, kind of, Mike and I are really the same age, so same idea. Really started watching it on my own.
I'm gonna remember you said that.
Yeah, thank you. But watching it on my own with TNG, probably season 2 or season 3, right when it started getting good. But I didn't watch the pilot because the pilot came out when I was 3 or 4 years old. Prior to that, I had experiences watching old recordings of TOS, some of the TOS movies that had already been out. But really, I came into really enjoying the show with Deep Space Nine, and that's why Deep Space Nine to this day is my favorite show, because it's the first one that I actually got to watch from start to finish. And I remember the hype that happened with that show, because TNG was at the height of its syndication prowess as being the top syndicated show at the time, and still I think it's one of the top syndicated shows of all time. But when Deep Space Nine was announced, it was a big thing. So covers of TV guides, which no one knows what a TV guide is anymore, but it was on the cover a lot. There was a lot of push for it, and it kind of hit with a thud because it wasn't like TNG. But that's really why I liked it so much, and especially as Mike mentioned in the later seasons. Basically, when the Defiant shows up, and we start going into the the Gamma Quadrant more. I've watched bits and pieces of Voyager. Part of that was because UPN was never a channel I got, so it had to be watched in reruns, and also I just think Voyager was a pretty bad show. I think Janeway is a war criminal, and she should be put away as soon as she returns to the Alpha Quadrant, because the woman's crazy. I've watched Enterprise all the way through, and that was, with everybody, the last experience I had of a new show coming on TV. And I remember Enterprise came out our freshman year of college. And I know this because the week before they released Enterprise on TV, they released the opening theme with the opening credits just to kind of tease the show. And my roommate at the time, who Mike knows, Andy, had to listen to Faith of the Heart way too many times in a row as I watched that over and over again. And I still like that song, believe it or not, even though everyone else hates it. So that's when it first came out. And I watched it all the way through, and then I think Enterprise was canceled right when it was starting to get really good. Season 3 and Season 4 of Enterprise were pretty good. So that's where I was in terms of TV. And, of course, with the movies, the latter movies are basically what most people know more than anything with the J.J. Abrams movies. I think, as I've said before in other shows, I think the first one of those, the 2009 one, was really good. Into Darkness was completely terrible. And I really like Beyond. I think Beyond was the best of the 3. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be the last of the 3 because they still haven't greenlit a 4th one because it made no money. So, and Mike and I did role play on an online chat room role play called The Nexus. And no, kids, this was not Star Trek Online. We didn't have graphics back then. But we did have little avatars and pictures. And we would have to set up times to be on together so we could chat together and do our stuff.
Kind of a generally sad affair.
But it went on for more than we like to admit. I think we were on that thing for a couple years at least.
Easily.
To a point where I think Mike and I were both admirals at the time, and it was shut down by it was shut down by Disney. The bastards took it over and killed it. But
so, foreshadowing.
Truth. So Mike and I both have quite a bit of experience with Star Trek, and I think we'll have a lot to talk about here as we go on.
Hell, I even read some of the books.
Yeah. I've read way too many of the books.
I mean, Ship of the Line, the cover had Kelsey Grammer right on it, and what 15-year-old isn't a fan of Kelsey Grammer? I mean...
And he was captaining what ship?
Oh, damn it. Not a Miranda class. I know that.
It was a refit Miranda class, wasn't it?
It had its own name.
It was a Kit Bash Miranda class.
It was a Miranda class with a thingy on top. Anyway, I don't remember, but...
Oh, come on, man.
I know.
I'm disappointed in you. It was Captain Bateson.
Oh, all right.
And he was piloting the USS Bozeman.
There it is. If it was earlier in the evening, I might have remembered that. Also, if I was less full of brisket.
Yes. Okay, well, so let's definitely move on. So, Star Trek Discovery. We haven't had a TV show since the early 2000s. 2005 is when Enterprise went off the air, and it was one that was canceled. It was only the second time a Star Trek show, aside from the animated series, which I won't count that, but it's only the second time a Star Trek show has been canceled. The other three shows, TOS being the other one, the other three shows, TNG, DS9, and Voyager, all got their 7-year runs and were able to end on their own terms. Enterprise didn't get that. And for the longest time, people thought, that's it. Star Trek is never going to be on TV anymore. There's not enough audience for it. Network television doesn't do sci-fi, and when they do it, they cancel it right away like Firefly. And cable TV can't have it because CBS owns the rights, and so forth and so on. So it was kind of dead. And especially so when the new Abrams verse stuff came out, it was pretty obvious that movies was going to be where it was at. But that changed in November of 2015 when CBS announced that it will, on the heels of the 50th anniversary, they weren't going to make the 50th anniversary of 2016, but by January of 2017, we were going to get a new show for Star Trek. And that's also when they announced at the same time that it's not going to be on TV. It will be on their fledgling system, their competition for Hulu and Netflix, which is CBS All Access. And that was all we heard for a bit. And then they pointed out rather quickly on that point, I think it was January of 2016, so nearly 2 years ago now, that they announced Brian Fuller, who had wrote for Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but was more known as a showrunner of shows like Pushing Daisies and most recently Hannibal as the main writer and showrunner for Discovery. And they announced that again that they were planning on a January 2017 release for this show. And the plan was that it was going to air on CBS one night and then fly over to All Access to be there. And that's when the greatest laid plans all fell apart. All on the same time, too, they did also mention Nicholas Meyer would be in the writer's room as well. Nicholas Meyer, known for quite a few things, but in the Star Trek world, he happens to be the guy who wrote and direct probably the two best Star Trek films, at least for the TOS era, if not at all of them. And that's Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, and Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country. So that guy knows his Star Trek. He knows how to make Star Trek well, and he was in the writer's room going into this. So that was pretty exciting as well, too. But then things got kind of scary with the fact that we didn't hear anything about Discovery for months. And then Comic-Con last year rolled around, and we got basically a CGI monstrosity of a ship leaving a space dock, which we watched in Mike's living room when it first came out. But that was about it. Nothing more until about November of 2016. And mind you, that they're telling us this show is going to air in January. We had no information on casting, no information on story points, nothing. And finally, they started announcing some of the cast in November, but they still had not announced the lead for the show. We found out why that was the case later on, when the main lead, was announced to be, excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. Oh my goodness, what's her name? Sonequa Martin Green was announced to be the lead, which we'll talk more about her in a little bit, but she wasn't announced until the spring of 2017 because she had a contract going with The Walking Dead, and you really can't announce that she's going to die on The Walking Dead before she dies on The Walking Dead. Spoilers, she died in The Walking Dead. Sorry. But long story short, it was announced around that time that Discovery would not be coming out in January. It was being pushed to May. That was pretty obvious since they hadn't even casted this freaking thing in November yet. And then between January and May, Brian Fuller left the production, and we have now found out that he was fired. And he was fired, from what we can tell, from inside sources because of him wanting, for one, him having a problem meeting deadlines, and CBS didn't like that, but also him wanting to put more time into the show than CBS wanted in terms of writing time and putting together everything before it went into production. CBS wanted to start rolling on this thing, and Brian wanted more time to put it all together, so Brian got fired. And then finally, CBS announced that the May deadline was going to come and pass, and then we go into where we are now, with September 24th being the time it will air on CBS. It will air at around the 7 o'clock hour, which will be right after Sunday Night Football, so it probably will get preempted half an hour to an hour, but sometime around there. And then it will go to CBS All Access. So long story there to kind of get us to the production, but this has been a pretty interesting production for a show, of any show, especially a Star Trek show. Mike, how do you feel about that little timeline I just gave, and what has been your impression on what the news has been for the past nearly 2 years now in the production setup for this thing?
You took me to school a little bit there. I didn't know all of that.
It's kind of painful.
It is. It really is, and it. I knew about all the delays, and frankly, that's always a mixed bag, because on one hand, I want to have faith that delays are necessary. It's the production making the right decision to push things back because it's not ready, because it's rushed, because they want to make it better. But then again, you've heard plenty of times in recent years, especially, that there have been some movies like Fantastic Four is the only one that's popping into my head right now. But
you mean Fan Four Stick?
But there have been others where dramatic reshoots or additional shoots were taking place to try and salvage an otherwise out of control raging dumpster fire. So I didn't get the impression that was the case here. So I was holding out hope. I'm still holding out hope. But the Brian Fuller news was certainly pretty disparaging. In fact, I think that's probably the number one thing right now that has left me uneasy about what we're going to get.
Well, I'm going to make you a little bit more uneasy, sir. First off, I mentioned Nicholas Myers in the writing room. He still is. But he came out and said a few months ago that he's actually putting together another Star Trek show for CBS. And the rumor is this is going to be Khan on City Alpha 5.
Yeah, I heard that too, and that freaks me out.
Yeah, that's not Star Trek, but that's a whole nother story. But so that tells me either Nicholas Meyer is not involved in Discovery anymore, which is depressing because I like what he has done. Every time he's come into Star Trek, he's revitalized it. Mm-hmm. When he came in for Star Trek 2, we had Star Trek the Motion Picture, which it made money, but it was not anything that people wrote home about.
Yeah.
And then Star Trek 5 came around, which was really the worst. I still think it's the worst one of all of them. And that's saying something. But then he came around and made, for me, my favorite Star Trek movie, which is Undiscovered Country. So I was really excited for Myers to come in, but it sounds like he's not really there. And it also tells me that CBS has really no faith in this show, that they're already starting to put another show in production.
Well, I read it a different way. I almost read it like they're putting the cart before the horse, and they're just assuming that by putting Star Trek back in the public's eye, that they've, they're going to print money. Because I can't imagine that if they think this show is going to air and fail, that they would already push forward another one, let alone one that supposedly has such a dreadful sounding premise.
Well,
So-
and you may be right. The other thing that ties in with what you're saying is they have always kind of said, not so much recently, but when it first was announced in November of 2015 and so on, that they were talking about this being an anthology series. It may not be the same cast every time. It may not be the same story every season.
Mhm.
It was going to follow arcs. So I could see one season being Khan, which, again, I don't need to see Khan in a desert planet, but whatever.
I mean, it could be a one-shot or something. And I mean,
Could be.
who knows? There could be a compelling story there, but as you said, it doesn't. It may take place in the Trek universe, but I sincerely doubt it's going to feel very Trek.
Yeah. And no matter what, it's going to be depressing because we know how it ends.
Indeed.
It ends with Chekhov getting a bug in his ear.
Yeah, which is a big problem with prequels, which is something I suspect we'll talk about.
It is. But before we do that, the other reason why I want to give you a sense of foreboding is it has been announced last week that reviewers have been able to see the first episode of Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But CBS has put an embargo on those reviews until it airs.
Always a good sign.
So you will not see any reviews on Discovery until after it airs, even though it has been seen by reviewers. And for those who may not follow film and TV as much as others, when a studio doesn't want you talking about their film or TV show before anyone sees it, it's usually not a good thing.
Whoever said that no publicity is bad publicity is a freaking idiot.
Well,
they don't work in Hollywood.
And because CBS has been so tight-lipped about this, we've had a few trailers and a couple stories in magazines. People are making their own assumptions, and we'll get into that here in a little bit with our assumptions, but people are making their own stories, and it's not a good narrative that this show's getting even before it comes out. And that's because CBS has done everything possible to make you not care about this show. Mm-hmm. I've seen a couple 30-second snippets on CBS. They're really hyping up when you go to their CBS All Access website because they've got the two of the characters front and center. But they haven't really tried to get people interested. I mean, I even mentioned when Enterprise came out, they released the opening credit roll a week before just to get people excited, and that was in 2001. I think you could probably do a little bit more with the internet here in 2017, I think.
You would think. Frankly, I just rewatched all the trailers that have been released for this show, and I largely feel like you're just seeing the same couple of scenes in every trailer that's come out. There's really not a variety of
no,
to choose from.
Well, and let's go into that. Let's talk about the story that we know so far. And for those who haven't been really paying attention, because again, as I mentioned, CBS hasn't been trying to make you pay attention. This is a prequel show. It takes place, I believe the trailers say 10 years prior to TOS. So that means Spock and Kirk are in Starfleet.
I actually thought it said 10 years before Enterprise.
No, this is definitely after Enterprise because we have the Federation. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, we have the Federation now. So this is Kirk and Spock are, and also Sarek is a character on this show.
Okay.
Sarek being Spock's dad.
But it's supposed to be okay.
Well, yeah, the Vulcan is Sarek. It really doesn't make sense, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But
it makes sense for one of the reasons I'm upset. So go ahead.
Yeah, the Vulcan is Sarek that we see in the trailers. But no, so Spock and Kirk are in space. I think Kirk is probably serving on the Farragut because I'm a geek and know that for no apparent reason. Spock is on the Enterprise working under Captain Pike. But we're dealing with, in the trailers, we're dealing with the USS Shinzou. Shinzon's a bad villain from Nemesis. We're dealing with the USS Shinzou. And our main character that we're going to be dealing with throughout this is Michael Burnham, who is not going to be a captain, at least not initially. She is a first officer, first of the Shinzou. And apparently something bad happens with the Shinzou because obviously she'll be on the USS Discovery working under another captain soon after. And what we've been told by the writers is there seems to be two pilots. The first pilot, which we're going to see next week, deals mainly with Michael on the Shinzou, and then a second pilot, which will deal with Jason Isaacs' character, who I'm blanking on his name right now because I forgot to look that up, but he is the captain of Discovery. So, and obviously with the name of the show, most of the time will be dealt with Discovery. But Mike, let's first talk about what we see in the trailers, how you feel about it being a prequel, how you feel about the main character not being a captain for the first time, and all of that good stuff.
Sure. I guess I'll start backward there. I have no problem with the main character not being a captain. I actually think that's with every Trek show that I've seen, TOS and TNG are arguably the most similar to one another, but in my opinion, and again, I didn't watch Enterprise, so I can't lump that in. But I mean, TNG, DS9, Voyager all had kind of a distinct feel to them a little bit. Their distinct kind of flavor, personality thing that set them apart from the others, largely setting based in those series. So I kind of think it's interesting. It's an interesting take to have the main character in this show be a first officer, not a captain. It offers a different perspective, I hope, on what's happening on the show. So I think that's kind of a good angle potentially. Also gives that character license to move from one ship to another ship at some point during the series, as the captain kind of has a ship and stays on that ship until they retire or get promoted or what have you. So that's all good. Help me out here. What were some of your other prompts?
How do you feel about being a prequel in general?
Not good.
I know you hadn't watched Enterprise, but we've done the prequel thing before, and technically we've kind of done it with the new movies as well, too.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't even want to go there. I'll throw it right out there and say I'm not a fan of the new movies. I find them entertaining and otherwise not great. I don't like prequels in general. It's lazy. What is the point of making a show where I already know how it's going to end? And I guess the thing that bugs me the most, and we can talk about this in detail later maybe, but is it's always with a prequel especially, it's this struggle to find continuity or to maintain continuity. Talk to anybody about the Alien movies. It's such a ridiculously divisive topic.
I hate Covenant. Just everyone knows.
Yeah, me too. And it's always because that you've got established canon, and then you have stuff that you go backward and try to, you want to make your own story, you want to put your own spin on it, you want to modernize it, but at the same time, it all has to meet at the same endpoint. Or if it doesn't, then you've created a rift, you've made yourself look stupid, you've whatever. Based on what you just said earlier, and I did know this, I don't know why I said it, but I'm like, okay, so we're going to one up this already difficult dilemma and try to shove a series in between Enterprise and TOS, and again try to do two things: try to make the start and ends line up, and we're going to try and give it today's modern world styling, meaning we're going to try to make it resemble the new movies that are a different continuity completely, unless they're not anymore. I can't keep track.
Well, neither can CBS, and I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the deal. I think it's like they're either going to try really hard to do that, which is going to require mountains of probably poor writing, because let's face it, you can't explain away. I don't think you're going to be able to explain away, like, the fact that the Klingons look completely different for the third time. And at the same time, maybe they're just going to say, screw it, we don't care, and do their own thing, which in a way I would give them some respect, but at the same time, I'm not going to look forward to reading anybody's angry Facebook posts about it. So there you have it.
Well, and I think part of I hate prequels as well. I think if you're going to tell me a story, tell me something new. Why can't we go another 100 or 200 years into the future? One of the really cool ideas that was bandied about by one of the writers from one of the original from one of the shows from the 90s, and it was it was either Ronald D. Moore, who also went on and did Battlestar Galactica, or it was somebody else that was working with him. Mentioned that their idea they pitched to the powers that be several years ago was moving ahead several hundred years to where the Federation is in decline and having to rebuild it basically from scratch after a calamity of some sort. That'd be something different, and you could still kind of change things up. Nothing's connected. You can kind of ignore continuity aside from saying these guys happened before. But you're right. When you shoehorn in a show, you're going to have people like us who get way too annoyed by this stuff, getting annoyed by this stuff. I mean, the one that we haven't hit on yet, and I kind of joked about, is we have been told that Michael Burnham, the main character, she is the adopted sister of Spock.
Yes.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit in the trailers where Sarek saves her as a child or what have you, and we don't know the whole story yet, but we do know that Michael is the first human to go to the Vulcan Science Academy.
Dear Hollywood, please stop making every character related to every other character.
Because it makes your universe smaller.
Yes, and that's a good point. Another thing about the prequel deal is it's not good world building, and to have a good sci-fi or fantasy series requires world building. Tolkien wrote volumes of backstory for Middle Earth, and all right, granted, we saw The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but even The Hobbit had eons of scripted, written out history that took place before it. If you show me a movie or a series of every friggin' important moment of that, it kind of ruins the imagination, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And arguably, I'm sitting here waiting for the what are they up to now? 6 spin-off series for Game of Thrones? Like, stop
well,
it.
after the Confederate idea went over like a lead balloon, you're probably going to get about 7 or 8 more spin-offs of Game of Thrones too. So.
Yes. Well, but yeah, I'm like, okay, we knew from TNG and beyond and TOS that the Federation and the Klingons had beef, blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't. Okay, sure, there might be a compelling story in there somewhere, but I don't need to see it because you already told me it happened.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing I want to talk about too. And I, believe it or not, I feel a little connected to this now more than before because we have had Robert Meyer Burnett on our show with our Twilight Zone podcast, Zonesodes. But Robert was in talks of directing Axanar, which was the fan film that killed fan films, for better or worse.
Uh-huh.
And one of the rumors and one of the thoughts was, why did CBS go after this fan film when they didn't go after others? One of it was this fan film brought in a lot more money than most did. And you can think what you want about that. I think it was not good for a fan film to take money in. Sorry, Robert, if you're listening. But that's where it is. But the other theory was that it hit a little too close to home. And again, for those who aren't geeks, Axanar is a battle in TOS history that happened before TOS that was a battle between the Federation and the Klingons that really sparked the war and then in turn the Cold War that we saw in TOS. So CBS went after this fan film hard and basically got it stopped. And the thought was, well, maybe CBS has a plan for Axanar, and that's the whole point. I think that's what we're seeing here, is Axanar is going to show up one way or another, which is just another reason why, again, we know that story. We've heard about it. There's been books about it. Why not do something different? Why not do something new? But I think that's where we're probably going a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, conspiracy theorists are gonna maybe rightly say that maybe it wasn't that CBS had a plan for Axonar. Maybe CBS went, "Huh, that's a good idea."
That
also, we legally own it, so
that fan trailer did pretty well on YouTube.
Exactly.
And hopefully we'll have Robert on. Robert, I hope you're listening. Hopefully we'll have Robert on sometime during this too, because his opinion on Discovery has been well known on Twitter. So I'd love to have him talk about one of the shows once it's out. But let's go a little bit deeper into this and start talking a little bit about the aesthetics of the show that we've seen before. We had already talked about this being a prequel. CBS has said that it is set in the Prime universe, so not the Abrams universe. Part of that being Paramount has the movies, CBS has the TV rights, so they really couldn't use the movies even if they wanted to. But I think it's very clear that they are using the new movies as kind of a feel. So let's talk a little bit about that, kind of the look of the ships, the look of the uniforms, and the look of the cinematography itself. And what do you think about what you've seen so far and the little bits and clips we've seen?
Yeah, the trailers all suffer a little bit from jumpy cam / cut special effect overload. So it's a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit tough to make out a lot of it. I don't really have a problem with any of the aesthetic aside from it's that whole thing about here you have a prequel and it's trying to take place during a particular era in established history. So we already know what the uniforms in Enterprise looked like. We knew what the uniforms in TOS looked like. And let's face it, you're not going to bridge that gap very easily, are you? And at the same time, this show has to look good. I mean, people today have a different design aesthetic. It doesn't look like the space retro 70s anymore. So it's going to be a struggle for them to figure out. Now, I personally don't hang up on details like that so much. I'm not going to get upset that none of the female officers have super skimpy short skirts. I mean, who wouldn't? But I think it looks quite good. There's a little bit of an Abrams style lens flare. I don't have any doubt that they're trying to evoke that feel, because that's what people know. They're trying to get a wider audience with the show than diehard old school Trek fans who were more than likely going to hate it anyway.
Jason Isaacs agrees with you, and we'll talk about that in a minute too.
So yeah, totally, and I actually agreed with his quote completely. So aesthetically looks fine. I thought we'll talk about the ships here.
Oh God, yes we will.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong, Scott.
You're wrong, Mike.
Okay, I probably am. I don't feel like we really saw the Discovery, or at least not that eyesore that came out in the teaser a year ago.
Okay, so you're right. What we have seen in the trailers is the Shinzou, which is why the assumption on the internet is the bulk of the first pilot, which, by the way, has a name now, and of course I probably should have remembered that. The Vulcan Hello. The Vulcan Hello is the first, because that's a great pilot episode. When I think pilots, I think Encounter at Farpoint, The Emissary, and the Vulcan Hello. But we're assuming that the pilots may mainly be the Shinzou, which is what we see in the trailers. And going in a little into predictions, I'm pretty sure the Shinzou's not going to make it out of the first episode. We have seen the Discovery only in stills. And it kept the same shape from Comic-Con, so it's got like the bird of prey looking wings.
It looks better though.
It does to an extent. It definitely looks like it wasn't thrown together for Comic-Con in 5 minutes. But it's also got something goofy that it did not have at Comic-Con. I don't know if you've seen this yet or not. The saucer section has cutouts in it. I'm gonna find it for you here.
That's again probably a nod to the Abrams series, because was it the Revenge or whatever that was in the second Abrams movie?
Yes.
Had cutouts as well.
You're right. I am sending you a link right now. and because this is the joys of live.
I was looking. I said I was looking for it in the trailers, and I thought maybe there were one or two ultra fast like action shots of it, and it's definitely okay. Yeah. That looks better, but still not great.
I'm not a fan of the flat design. I mean, even with
No.
Enterprise, they use kind of a bent nacelle look that looked at least kind of streamlined. This looks like it's a kid match between a Federation ship and a Klingon bird of prey, which I'll talk about in a little bit with my predictions. I think that's actually there's a point to that.
Possibly, yeah. Now the Shinzou, I think, looks perfectly fine.
The Shinzou looks like a Federation starship.
It does. It looks like one of the kind of wackier styles, like the Enterprise from Enterprise, or some of the more modern designs kind of broke the mold on the TOS body styles of the ships too. Like the Akira is one from I think it first appeared in First Contact, and it was a really cool looking ship in my mind.
And it really was the Enterprise.
One of my favorites.
They used the Akira design. I just sent you another link that shows the cutouts. What I'm talking about. You can see there's actually two saucer sections, one intercut into another with 4 little pylons that connect it. And I'm just thinking to myself, if I am a Klingon captain, I'm going to aim for those little pylons right there and cause some trouble.
This is weird. I agree. It does not look like any Federation ship that has been in any series to date. And I mean, even as the continuity progressed, like we all know, like the Voyager Intrepid class had a much different body shape compared to older models. It was a little bit thicker, chunkier, more blended together, versus having all the like appendages. Still nothing like that though. This is very geometric, which is not at all the Federation style that we've seen.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me. It honestly reminds me of a Star Wars ship design, and I say this because I remember watching some behind the scenes where, a lot of the guys that designed the ships and things, especially for the prequel Star Wars movies, prequels, basically mentioned that how they went about it was they take two radically different simple geometric shapes and stick them together and then like mold out the details. And then
name it after that too. X-Wing, Y-Wing, B-Wing.
A lot of times, yeah. And so I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, yep, they took a triangle and a circle and they just like mated them.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look right.
Well,
maybe there's a good plot point. I hope there's a really damn good plot point to explain this. But...
Well, and here's my concern too. I mean, this is just the meta stuff that we know about. We're dealing with 2 different showrunners and 2 different writers' rooms, with Brian Fuller and after Brian Fuller. So obviously this ship came out and was put together by Brian Fuller and his crowd because they're the ones who showed it at Comic-Con. So I'm thinking, maybe it's a plot point that the Federation, the Klingons have got together and made some kind of, exploratory ship to kind of as a peace offering to each other, and maybe that's part of the plot point. But is that going to be in the show, or is that going to be something that gets dropped and so we never hear about it? It just looks weird. I don't know. And I'm just assuming that I haven't heard that anywhere.
I guess on this note, I would optimistically say that since it seems like the Shinzou has a much more familiar, better fit look to it, and if this is truly what they're still going for, is so radically different, then I can only hope that the juxtaposition of those 2 ships is deliberate and it will come into play.
I hope that too. We get a little brief snippet, and it's Captain Lorca. I finally figured out it was Jason Isaacs' character. Right. We get a little bit of a snippet of Lorca basically telling Michael, you screwed up, and I'm guessing that's when the Shinzon blew up. Mm-hmm. Don't you want a chance to fix it or to stop the war you started or something like that? So I can see Discovery being some kind of experimental ship that's going to be doing that. So, I mean, there's a chance there. It looks really ugly. I'm used to my pretty-looking ships. I got several of them behind my head. I'm not going to have the Discovery on my wall just because it's kind of ugly.
And I'll say this too, though. You have the original Enterprise, and then you had the refit that was in the movies. If you look at the Excelsior, It's pretty funky looking by comparison to the Constitution, and it was funky looking for a reason.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see something cool.
And part of it too, story point. The first time we saw Excelsior, we were supposed to hate the Excelsior. True. We saw the Excelsior in Star Trek 3, and the whole point was it was going to be the ship that was supposed to replace our Enterprise that we loved, and so we got a kick out of Scotty basically neutering it in the middle of the movie. So we were supposed to hate the Excelsior for that very reason, I think. But yeah, I aside from the ships, I don't have any. I'm with you. I think the for one, I was worried when I found out it was going to All Access that this was going to be made on the cheap.
Yep.
And based on the trailers, this is not being made on the cheap. CBS is putting money into the show.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it.
I like the uniforms. I think they look more militaristic, much like the TOS movies than the TOS show. I'm okay with that. I can definitely see a progression from Enterprise to these.
They look more familiar to Enterprise to me, for sure. I mean, they're
the Star Trek fan in me is freaking out that Discovery and Shinzou's crew has the Enterprise Delta that wasn't the Starfleet Delta until after the Enterprise's first 5-year mission, but I'll have to just live with that because no one remembers that anymore. But I think aside from the ship design being completely and totally ugly to me, I'm looking forward to the production value, and I think that's one of the things that's a highlight for me right now is the production value. So let's dive in a little bit into the characters. And the one thing I wanted, we already talked about the fact that Michael is not going to be a main character, a captain, but is the main character. You mentioned that you were good with that. I am too. One of my favorite episodes from TNG was an episode called Lower Decks, and Lower Decks followed 4 or 5 crewmen through just a normal day that turned out to be not normal because it's the Enterprise, so nothing's ever normal on TNG's Enterprise. But you see Riker a couple times, you see Picard a couple times, but really you're following these 4 or 5 crewmen through their day. And it's a really good episode because it takes us away from those command decisions. Now, Michael is going to be the first officer, so she's going to be on the bridge a lot. She's going to be the one making a lot of decisions. But she will be disconnected from those command points. I think that'll be interesting to see. But we've also kind of talked to a little bit about the Klingons, which obviously are going to be our characters through most of the show. And we know that because the discussion has been that we're going to follow a Klingon crew as well as the Federation crew. And again, that was back when Fuller was running it, so it may have changed a little bit. In fact, we know one of the Klingon characters has actually, in the middle of production, the actor was told they were changing their character completely, changed the person's name, changed everything. So things are changing, but we're going to be seeing more of the Klingons than what we have seen recently. So, Mike, what are your impressions of what you've seen of the Klingons? And then I want to read a quote about what they're going to be doing with the Klingons, but I want to get your first impressions first.
I don't even know what to say about them, quite frankly. They look not at all like the Klingons that I remember from definitely not from TOS, certainly not from TNG either. So that's another one of these like prequel points where I'm wondering, okay, how are you going to try and explain this? And also, I don't know if I really want you to. I really am not sure. I know there's a lot of fiction that goes already into explaining the difference in Klingons between TOS and TNG. I couldn't off the top of my head tell you what any of it actually says. Something about a virus. But yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. They look very unfamiliar. It to me jarred me a little bit when I first saw them because it kind of sadly reminded me of the Klingons in the Abrams verse,
which are really bad.
Not Klingon at all. They're terrible.
No. It was genetic mutation,
by
a genetic virus in Enterprise, which is whatever. But
so they've already tried to explain it. So now,
Now we have been told through the last panel at, I think, Comic-Con or Creation or one of the other comic conventions that we're going to be told the ridges are sensory devices. So the Klingons use it to sense things, but whatever that means. But one of the things that concerns me about the Klingons, and it's been kind of highlighted in a couple articles, including one by Entertainment Weekly, is the Klingons have always been an allegory to the Federation being, the West, the United States, NATO, whatever, and the Klingons being the Russians, the Soviets, the two powers clashing. And even, once the Soviet Union fell, we got Star Trek VI, which is about the end of the Cold War. And then we had in TNG and DS9 an uneasy alliance and all that stuff, which kind of still followed that allegory. Well, according to the writers, that allegory is being thrown out the window. One of the showrunner, Aaron Harberts, said the allegory is that we really started working on the show in earnest around the time the election was happening, this being 2016. The Klingons are going to help us really look at certain sides of ourselves and our country.
Boy.
Isolationism is a big theme. Racial purity is a big theme. The Klingons are not the enemy, but they do have a different view on things. It raises big questions. Should we let people in? Do we want to change? There's also the question of just because you reach your hand out to someone, do you have to take it? Sometimes they don't want to take it. It's been interesting to see how the times have become more of a mirror than we even thought they were going to be. So the Klingons are Trump supporters, basically.
I've heard this narrative an awful lot lately with different shows where they supposedly started down a direction of plotline, and somehow reality has caught up in shockingly more accurate ways than they anticipated.
Marvel, what? Captain America's a Nazi?
And kind of interesting if truly if truly Hollywood is more perceptive than many people think. Yeah, I don't know. All I can say about that is I hope they don't beat us over the head with it. And
yeah,
I have some other points to make about that or concerns as we just continue discussing. But on a more general note, I'm going to get crucified for saying this. Like, the Klingons are kind of like, I'm going to say they're kind of like one of the big bads in the Star Trek universe, or at least they're one of the, aside from humans, what's another race that you think of when somebody says Star Trek to you? Klingons.
Yeah.
And they've always kind of not made sense to me in a way, in terms of how they're portrayed. In all of TNG, DS9, Voyager, because I think there was a Klingon in like 2 episodes of Voyager, not counting Kalana. They're like this very feudal society, and every time they ever showed them, it just seemed like a bunch of angry dudes constantly fighting and disagreeing about everything and like fighting each other to the death. And I always, in the back of my head, was like, how did anybody pull their head out of their ass long enough to like invent a warp drive or a cloaking device or anything to make them like a threat to the Federation? And so then taking that same thought and applying it to what we see in these trailers, I feel like, granted with very little context, that what we've seen of the Klingons feels very primitive. So, yeah, there you have it. It just kind of reinforces this notion that I already had about them.
Yeah, no, I think one of the issues that I have had with both this show coming up, but also with parts of the Abrams movies, is the over-reliance on the Klingons too, because you're right, everyone knows of the Klingons, so that's what they assume is what's going to be on the show. And because of that, the Klingons have had to kind of become whatever the plot wants them to be. So in Into Darkness, they were just ugly-looking, grunting idiots on Kronos because that's what they needed at the time. They needed cannon fodder to shoot at. And now we need an allegory for the election of 2016 and building a wall. So the Klingons are now going to be building a wall. And I think if you're going to do that, if you want to tell that story, fine, tell that story. If it's going to be a good one, we'll see. But you don't need to use the Klingons for that. Find another race.
I mean, that was totally the point with the Abrams movie as well. It's like, you know, they didn't need to be the Klingons. They weren't the Klingons in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, it's like, what was the point other than, well, and for that matter, Khan wasn't really Khan. So there you go.
Yeah, that Into Darkness. I argue the reason why Beyond didn't do well is because Into Darkness was so bad that people just gave up on it.
Yeah, and I would buy that.
Because I like Beyond, but Into Darkness is just freaking terrible. But so we don't know too much about the other characters right now to talk about them. Is there anything that stood out to you in the trailers or in what you've read about the characters that you want to talk about? You may want to talk about Sarek, I'm guessing.
Well, actually, no.
Okay.
Kind of in line with what you were just saying about using the Klingons as an allegory for modern troubles. Just as a side note, like I believe I've read that this show's gonna feature some openly gay characters. This series is featuring a black woman as the primary character. I don't have problems with any of these things at all as what they are. What I do have a problem with is when all of a sudden it's bad writing, meaning this show just has to do stuff like this to be edgy and to grab attention, but the writing doesn't back it up. You know what I mean? Like, let's have this mean something if we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Or let's have it mean nothing if we're gonna do it. Let's not put a character in and beat us over the face with whatever message you're trying to send today. Or I don't even know how to say it without potentially clumsily sounding like a racist or something, because it's not that at all. It's just don't do it to grab attention. That's kind of the summary. And it's the same thing with beyond this show. Obviously it's well, for God's sake, the new Doctor Who. I could care less that the new Doctor Who is a woman, but I hope that the show doesn't abuse that fact. I hope it doesn't beat us over the head with it where it doesn't need to. I think
Doctor Who having a better showrunner. That's just
there is that. And one of my buddies said it best, and I think you can apply this to Trek as well. It's like I got no problem with it, but I'm going to give them exactly 3 boob jokes, and when that's done, they need to knock it off, or I'm quitting. And it's kind of the same thing with Trek. It's like, okay, I have no problem with some characters being gay or some characters being, the captains being women or whatever like that. None of that bothers me as long as they don't turn it into a circus.
You're right. Diversity for the sake of diversity is not diversity, and it's not good. If Michael Burnham's character is a good character, it doesn't matter if she's black, white, or what have you. The fact that she is a black woman is good because we need more of those on TV, but that shouldn't be her character. It could be character points.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly. You said it better than I did.
No, you said it fine. The other one you mentioned, Anthony Rapp, who people know mostly from Rent, the Broadway show, and also he played his character in the Rent movie, is playing the science officer who is openly gay. And he will be the first openly gay character on a Star Trek TV show. Now, he has said that you're actually going to get to see his partner in conversation in their living quarters, and I'm reading here verbatim, you get to see our relationship over time, treated as any other relationship would be treated. And I'm hoping that's the case, as you mentioned. I actually think, I know George Takei disagreed, but I like the way they handled Sulu's character in Beyond, because they made Sulu gay, but it was 2 scenes in passing, and there was no one brought it up. No one said anything. He just kissed his husband, and at the end, he was happy to see his husband. That's it.
Yeah, I exactly. It was a detail, not a statement, I guess.
Yeah.
Not turned into a fiasco, and I'm perfectly fine with that. The thing about Trek, with all of its diversity, is that Trek, is always meant to be a reflection on. I was going to sound cheesy. I feel like it's meant to be a reflection on humanity's hope for the future.
Absolutely.
And humanity's hope for the future at a point in time, when this show is taking place, is that all of that stuff is nothing anymore. It's not something to point your finger at. It just is the way it is. We hopefully get over some of these hang-ups, and life is just life.
Infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
There you go.
Now, and I think that could go a little too extreme, and I don't think we're going to have this with this show, but I think sometimes when people follow the Roddenberry philosophy in writing, it means no conflict. That because everything is utopian in the 23rd century and the 24th century, we don't get to have anything like conflict. But I think a good example of it working well is Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
The humans don't conflict with themselves as much, but the inner conflict between the humans interacting with aliens, the humans interacting with their situations causes conflict. And I think
it's arguably let's hope for the conflict in the show not being focused around our own petty bullshit, and it explores some deeper issues.
Well, and I'm quite all right with this show doing allegory. I mean, TOS, much like Twilight Zone, which I talk about way too much in my other show, dealt with issues of the day. So I am okay with Discovery talking about the fact that, for whether you agree with it or not, the United States is having a conflict within itself right now about how involved we want to be on the world stage anymore. Do we want to continue to be that superpower after World War II that basically decided everything and was involved in everything around the world, or do we want to deal with our internal issues and kind of leave the rest of the world to itself? And I know that's very much black and white. There's more gray in between there, but that's the idea. I'm okay with Discovery having that conversation. I don't know if I'm okay with it being the only conversation Discovery may have throughout the show.
Yes, I agree. I certainly hope that's not the case. And again, it's not to beat the dead horse, but it's like I want the show to have a good story with compelling characters. I don't want it to be trying to collect merit badges.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, we're going to find out. And I do want to point out, for those who are going to be following us through this, because Star Trek usually deals in allegory, we're going to talk about how the connections are being made between what may be happening in current times and what's going on in the show. So if you're not into those conversations, sorry, but they're going to come up. I'm guessing just by what the writers have been saying that they're going to have to come up. So let's kind of start wrapping this up. The first thing I want to do is have us make a few predictions and see how wrong we're going to be after 15 episodes. So, Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Give me a couple predictions based on what you have seen and what you have read about what you think is going to happen.
There's not much to go on. I don't feel. I think you're right. I think we're not going to see very much of the Shinzou. I think that's going to be largely a prequel to the prequel, if you will. I think what will probably land up happening, and it would make sense with the character being a first officer, not a captain, is I think we're going to see Michael Burnham's character, or the character of Michael Burnham, placed into a squeeze between her own conscious, the people under her, and what her captain and are probably what the rest of the Starfleet command want to do. I'm guessing that with Jason Isaacs, he's an interesting actor, and he plays largely plays a kind of particular type of character, if you will.
He's the guy you want to hate in every movie he's in.
Not always, but yeah. He's certainly one that you would definitely keep an eye on always. Even if you think he's not necessarily the bad guy, I think he will have a motivation that he thinks is right, and I think it will probably come into conflict with the main character.
He's got the shifty eyes, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. So yeah, much more than that. I think what's going to happen is, there's going to be this war that has started. I think there are going to be people that want it to end, and I think there's going to be at least one character who really, really doesn't want it to end, or at least wants to end it on his terms.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I think you're right on all of that. The other thing I forgot to mention before we started talking about this is one of the writers, and I did not pull up the source, so I can't tell you who it is, unfortunately, said that they are going to take some notes from Game of Thrones, and the fact that not every character is sacrosanct, not every character needs to survive the entire show. So people that you may get tied to and start liking as characters may not survive.
Oh, Isaac's days are numbered. I don't.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah,
surviving an entire season.
I'm pretty sure that sooner or later Michael Burnham's going to be captain, because as much as I like the idea of her not being captain, I don't think the writers can handle that for too long.
I agree, and I really like the actor of Jason Isaacs, and so simply based on how much I think everybody in Hollywood hates my personal tastes, I'm pretty sure he won't be around long.
I also think that Captain Georgia, however you pronounce her name, Elizabeth Yeoh, is not making it out of the pilot. She did. Yeah, she is Michael's mentor. She is, from what we understand, she took over the mentorship from Sarek. And she's the one who tells Michael in the trailer that it's time for her own command. And I think she goes down with the Shinzou, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to see a lot of I think this show is going to have a lot of back and forth, present day and flashback type of stuff going on. So I think we'll see her in a lot of episodes, but I think she'll not actively be present in the whatever present day is.
I hadn't thought about that, but I can see that. And it's going to annoy the hell out of me if they do that, because if they keep showing me flashbacks to Michael's past, I'm going to keep asking why isn't Spock around, since she's the adopted sister. And for that matter, why isn't Sybok around? Where are these people?
Yeah, that whole thing is just going to bother the crap out of me. I think I'm going to get tired of seeing Sarek's face really quickly.
I agree with that, especially when we know... Again, with TOS and Journey to Babel, Sarek does not like the Federation. He's an ambassador to it, but he's not a big fan of humans, and he's really not a big fan of the fact, he's married to a human, but he's not a big fan of the Federation itself, and he's definitely not a fan of his son being in the Federation. So why would he be okay with his adopted daughter joining the Federation as well, too? I find that very odd.
Yeah, they've obviously have some kind of connection. I sincerely hope that they get rid of that family connection. I know they won't, but I just don't want it to be there. I'm so damn sick of Hollywood doing this. It's just lazy.
I agree. A couple other predictions of mine is I agree with you. I think Isaac is going to be a bad guy at the end of it. Maybe not so much like a black hat twisting his mustache, but he will make decisions that will cause the other characters to have an ethical dilemma, and they're going to have to go against him. And you kind of catch that in the trailer again when he has that one or two quotes that we've had of his saying, "Don't you want a chance to stop the war that you started?" Well, how does he want to stop it is the big question.
I think that's going to be the crux of the whole show is he's going to be the guy that wants to either keep banging the war drum or he's going to do something crazy. Yeah.
My other thing is I think Michael's career is going to be stunted in the pilot. I think what we have seen is that she is on a trajectory for command, and to a point where her commanding officer, played by Michelle Yeoh, says that she's ready for command, and then she screws up, gets her ship blown up, or at least is involved in it, causes a war with the Klingons, and so now she's stuck on Discovery when she should have had her own command too, which I think would be interesting to see as well.
I also predict that Harry Mudd is going to be not at all like Harry Mudd.
Okay, yeah, the fact that they're having Harry Mudd on here has a potential to be fun.
Yeah, but
I never watched The Office, so I don't know the actor that well. But it's Harry Mudd.
Oh, I think the actor has potential, but I mean, just based on how he's like this goofy, bumbling comedy relief character in TOS, and the one line from him that they show in the trailer is like this kind of almost chilling delivery. I'm like, why? Yeah. Once again, it's going to be like, why was it Harry Mudd? Why couldn't it have been any other character and just do that differently?
You're going to love this. Jonathan Frakes, who is directing an episode of Discovery, has let it slip, I think, yesterday, that there will be an episode in the Mirror Universe.
Yeah, I saw that, and I'm hoping it's misinformation. I don't know.
The Mirror Universe was never overused too much, and in fact, when it did get overused was in Deep Space Nine, but I thought it was fun just to see the characters I loved doing stupid stuff and doing different things, like Kira Nerys being a dominatrix was kind of interesting.
It's kind of right up there with the following the the lackeys on the Enterprise, that kind of like to get that random episode that's just for fun, just funsies. Watch the guy that cleans the photon torpedoes.
And I think Enterprise did the Mirror Universe episode they did very well, because what happens is they actually go back and they show where the universe split. And it was when the Vulcans land for first contact, and they actually had James Cromwell on the episode playing Zephyr Cochrane. The humans, instead of shaking the Vulcans' hands, pull guns on the Vulcans and steal their ship. And that's where the Mirror Universe split. So I think it could be done fun, but you've only got 15 episodes for this thing to make its own. Don't retread stuff.
I said, I feel like they're already grasping at merit badges with this, and I think this is just another one. It's like, oh, it's Trek, so we got to have a Mirror Universe episode. I bet someone's going to get some pond fire before it's all over, too.
Yeah, but, so I think you're right, but then I'm getting mixed signals, because I've alluded to this quote before, and you said you agreed with it, and I'll read it here now. Jason Isaacs got himself in a bit of trouble with William Shatner over this one. He said, "I don't mean to sound irrelevant. I don't mean to sound irreverent when I say I don't care about the diehard Trek fans. I only don't care about them in the sense that I know they're going to all watch anyway. I look forward to having the fun of them being outraged so that he can sit up all night and talk about it with each other." And then he received a lot of pushback, obviously. So he tweeted, "Fun facts. Yours," and he was retweeting this Shatner actually at this point. "Fun facts. Yours are infallible boots. I'm going barefoot. Never mentioned legacies. Said I didn't care about attracting the diehard fans." And then he said, "That said, for the few idiots offended enough to tell me to go fuck myself and they'll never watch, I'm my top choice, and I dare you never to watch."
Yep. That's pretty badass.
So
he's totally right.
So I wonder if the showrunners and at least Jason Isaacs really doesn't care about us diehard fans, and they're trying to attract the new fans.
Frankly, they would be smart not to, because as I said, I think as an old fan, you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. If you hate it, you're probably still going to watch. Well, at least a lot of those guys are still going to watch it. And it is just, once again, kind of sad that they chose to do the prequel thing, because as a show, it has to blaze its own trail. It can't be a rehash of what we've already seen, although that is what some people certainly want. And it's going to be harder to do as a prequel without offending people. So maybe the right approach is to just not care and go about doing what they want to do. I don't know.
Well, and with that too, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do two quick questions to finish this off. The first one, and I'll end on a high note, so we'll go with the low note first. What scares us the most about this show? Mike, what scares you the most about Discovery?
We've talked about it already. I think what scares me the most is that I'm going to find the whole thing, story-wise, character-wise, to be not compelling. I think I'm afraid of one-dimensional characters and very on-the-nose plot trying to relate to modern day, our modern day issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to land up not feeling like Trek because it's trying too hard to just grab attention.
What scares me the most is CBS All Access. The first episode, and I was wrong. It's not 7 o'clock. It airs. I just looked it up. 7:30 Central Time next Sunday, and it will go for an hour. Looks to be like an hour and 5 minutes. And then it will go immediately to CBS All Access, and that'll be the only place you can watch it. Couple things on that. One, CBS All Access does not follow the Netflix approach of dropping the whole show at once. It's going to follow the Hulu approach of dropping an episode a week, which is why we're going to be doing this show once a week. But also, they're going to have a mid-break in the season. So we're going to have a bulk of episodes in 2017, and then we're going to have a bulk of season 1 in 2018. So they're going to break it up even more. The goal is being that you're going to keep your subscription the whole time. My fear is people are not going to subscribe to this. They're going to watch it the first episode because it's a new Star Trek, even though, again, CBS isn't even telling you it's on TV. Their commercials are saying CBS All Access. They're not saying it's going to air at 7:30 on Central Time next week. But they're going to get good numbers for that, and then there will be a drop-off immensely when it goes to All Access because people are going to pirate it. People are just not going to care or what have you, and so they're not going to watch it. And so even if it's a good show,
Yep.
which is questionable at this point, but even if it's a good show, I don't think people are going to watch it. And
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Have you watched The Orville yet?
I have not, actually.
Okay. If you like Seth MacFarlane, the humor is right up there. But
Great.
The one thing I will say about The Orville, I actually liked the first episode, but The Orville brought in 8 million fans, or 8 million viewers for the first episode. So there is, and it's probably a little crossover between sci-fi folks and MacFarlane fans, but there is an interest in this kind of stuff because The Orville is I wouldn't even call it a parody. It wants to be a Star Trek show, but it doesn't have the rights to Star Trek.
I wonder how many people we're going to hear say that The Orville is more Trek than Discovery is.
I may be one of them before it's all said and done.
See. I know. It could be a fair thing.
But what I'm saying here is Orville pulled in 8 million viewers. We'll see how week 2 does. But I don't see that many people, or even close to that many people, translating over to CBS All Access for this show.
No, it is funny because I feel like, again, I actually feel like CBS is already pretending like this show is a smash hit, and as such, they've kind of done this. Let's split the season up into 2 halves because Walking Dead gets away with it, but then again, Walking Dead is on AMC, and people don't drop their cable routinely, and they have cable in the first place. Whereas CBS and their stupid all access deal, I mean, I don't know. I've never even heard of it until I heard of this show, quite frankly.
It's got Big Brother on it. You can watch all the videos and the lawyer.
Yeah, so there you go. They're pretending like this thing has some stride, but I think they may be grossly overestimating the reach of their platform and people's commitment. Because let me tell you, I'm with you. If the first 7 episodes of this show aren't just setting the world on fire, then people aren't coming back for the second half.
I'm going to force you to come back and watch these things, even if they are bad, just so you know.
For sure. I'll be there anyway, but a lot of people won't. And
You're right.
I guess that's the point. You
And-
can get away with that mid-season crap when you're on TV and you put commercials in people's faces and they're not dropping a service. But
well, and I think that's my big concern is too. I mean, when Enterprise went down in flames, whether you like the show or not, and I was one of the ones who liked the show, it killed Star Trek for over a decade on TV. If this thing dies again because CBS did it wrong, we may not get another show, period.
Yep.
And that is depressing to me because I think Star Trek does better on TV. I think you get much more out of it when you are able to experience these characters for a long period of time and get more stories out of them rather than what you're seeing. But we'll see. I mean, we'll get the first episode on CBS, and I'm going to be one of the guys who's actually going to get all access, sadly. And I'm also going to have to go out and buy a Chromecast because my DVD player doesn't have CBS as an app, so I'll have to do that too. But I will do that for him. Okay, last question, Mike. What are you looking forward to the most about Discovery? Let's end on a high note, kind of.
I have to think of something.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, quite frankly, I don't know. There's nothing specific that I can say that I'm necessarily looking forward to. I'm sincerely just hoping to get some good new Trek in the world because I feel like, we could use a little bit of that. And I hope I'm not getting it from Seth MacFarlane instead.
You should watch The Orville. I think you'll enjoy it. I really do.
I totally will.
It's aside from the MacFarlane sarcastic humor, and there literally is an ejaculation joke in the first 20 seconds of the show. And it's actually a funny joke. But that being said, and he refers to it later on, but you'll have to watch. But aside from the over-the-top MacFarlane humor, it is a Star Trek episode. They deal with a new tech that is being that some other race is trying to steal, and they got to protect it. And it's a Star Trek show. It's just humorous, and it's an hour long. So deal with it as you will. But for me, I'm in the same boat. I was very excited for Discovery when it first was being talked about. Now I'm kind of lukewarm on the show itself just because of everything I've seen. But I am excited because I get to experience something that I haven't experienced in over a decade, and that's watching a new Star Trek show on TV, even if it's only on TV for an episode. And also I get to selfishly force my 7-year-old daughter to sit down with me and watch it. And she actually watched The Orville with me, and she enjoyed it. So I think she'll like Star Trek as well too. Yeah, say what you will about my parenting, but she enjoyed it. And so we'll have her watch Star Trek too.
It's not your fault. It's the network and censorship and all that.
No, it's my fault. I'm a terrible parent. It's fun. But so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to having new Star Trek even for a bit. So yeah, that's basically all we have to discuss today. I think we've gone way over our hour probably. But sorry. Mike, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
No, I'd really just like to discuss Federation ship design more. I think I've got another 45 minutes of material in me. Oh,
dude, I can name so many classes. It's not even funny. What ship? Oh, yeah. What class of ship did you have on the Nexus?
I think I ended up with a Prometheus.
Yes, you did. You had a Prometheus. I had
it's the Cadillac right there.
I got stuck with a Steam Runner for a while, and then finally I had a Sovereign class, so I was okay.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
The USS Kentucky was my ship. But okay. So our plan is we'll be releasing these the morning after the show airs. So the hope is to have next week's episode Monday as this week is coming out. And we'll know that because CBS is actually airing on TV. Now, unfortunately, they don't really tell us when it's going to air on All Access yet. So it may vary when we can do this show based on when it drops on All Access and when Mike and I can see it. But we're hoping to get these shows out to you every Monday, and we'll do our best to do that. You can find our shows at thefrontrowmoviereviews.com. You can email us at thefrontrowmoviereviews@gmail.com. triumphant.com. And you can find these shows both on YouTube and on your podcasting service of choice. Whatever you're watching us or listening to us on, please give us a review and a rating. Your ratings and reviews bounce us up in the searches, and it gets more people listening to us and watching us. And we hit a pretty good threshold last week on our YouTube channel. Part of that is because I filmed Hurricane Irma and people were interested. But we have gotten quite a few new subscribers to our YouTube channel. So welcome to all of you. And we're hoping we get some more people to join us as well throughout this discussion we're going to have for at least one season of Star Trek. We'll see how it goes from there. Mikey, thank you for joining me on this. I'm looking forward to having these conversations. I really like geeking out about TV, especially. I'm looking forward to geeking out about Star Trek. And at worst, we can at least talk about other Star Trek shows that were better than this. At best, we can talk about a good Star Trek show.
There you go. And it'll keep me fresh until I can talk about John Cena and Transformers Bumblebee.
The time is coming, sir. The time is coming. All right, well, until next week, we will see you on the couch, and live long and prosper.